Hello, friends. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, whichever time zone you are viewing from. Welcome again to our YouTube channel, EdTechSociety-AllLearners. And I would like to inform you guys that today we are going to cover three important phases of the ADM. Those are phase B, C, and D, and also called as the business architecture, information system, and application architecture. And the phase D is called as the technology architecture. And as usual, we're going to cover some of the relevant exam related questions which you might encounter during your foundation exam. So let's get started with the details of the phase B, C, and D. Okay, so before we start the journey of the phase B, C, D, today's approach is a bit different. If you guys are following us, you know that we start with the purpose of the particular phase. Then we talked about the input, the output, and the steps being performed during those journey and during those phase itself, like we have done in our preliminary phase and as well as the vision phase. But today we are going to cover three phases at the same time, phase B, C, and D. And why we have took this approach, kind of a combined approach, because during this phase B, C, and D, the tasks, the activities, the input parameters, output, and lot of things are pretty common. Common in the sense, I would say they are a bit different from a kind of a business architecture perspective. C is the application and information system, and D is the technology perspective. So, by definition, the purpose, the input, output, and the steps are actually different. But on a larger aspect, most of the steps, actions, or the input and outputs, by large, they are same, and it just differs here and there. And what we are planning to do, we will provide you a comparative study of each of these phase B, C, and D and show you the difference. So that will help you to understand, conceptualize, and memorize during your exam and for your long-term career as well. So that's the agenda for today and the approach for today's session. So as I mentioned, let's start with the purpose of the phase B, C, and D. So now you can see in this particular screen we have captured in these three columns, phase B business architecture, phase C is information system architecture, and phase D is the technology architecture. And primarily there are two objectives. Objective one is primarily the developing the target architecture that describes how the enterprise needs to operate to achieve the business goals and respond to the strategic drivers set out in the architecture vision in a way that addresses the statement of the architecture work and stakeholders concern. So primarily the target, the basically the goal is developing the target architecture. Now for business phase B, it is the business architecture. For phase C, it's a target information system and application architecture. And for phase D, it's basically the target technology architecture. So that's the by large, the difference is. Now the objective two is identifying the candidate architecture roadmap components based upon gaps between the baseline and target business architecture. Whereas for phase C, again, it's the identifying the candidate architecture roadmap components based on the gaps between the baseline and target information system, data, and application architecture. Whereas for phase D, it's basically the technology architecture. So if you can understand and what we're trying to explain you guys on a very high level, primarily there are two objectives which mostly common for all three phases. Phase B, C, D, It's basically developing the target architecture and identifying the candidate architecture roadmap based on upon the gaps. So you have to just understand for phase B, it's a business architecture, phase C, it's the information system and application architecture, and phase D, it's a technology architecture. So please try to remember, understand and remember, and it will be helpful for your exam as well. Moving on, in the same format, we have captured the different inputs which are being used during this phase B business architecture, phase C information and system and application architecture, and phase D for technology architecture. So if I just cover the phase B business architecture, and then I will highlight what the difference for phase C and phase D. So the inputs primarily are for reference material external to the enterprise. It's basically the architecture reference material. For the phase B, then non-architectural inputs are request for architecture work, business principle, business goals and business drivers, capability assessment and communication plan. And for architectural inputs, there are the list we have captured here. The organizational model for enterprise architecture, tailored architecture framework, approved statement of architecture work, architecture principle, enterprise continuum, architecture repository, architecture vision, draft architecture definition document. So this is a quite a list, but please try to remember as much as possible, because some of these points are very crucial and important for both the exams, in fact, the foundation as well as for the practitioner. So similarly for phase C and D also, the inputs are pretty same. We'd say the only difference are highlighted here, like the TOGAF series guide and the open group guide. And at the end, the architectural input category, we have this business and data architecture components of an architecture roadmap. So this is a additional input for the phase C information system and application architecture. Whereas for phase D technology architecture, the kind of a delta is product information on candidate products, that is the reference material. And from an architectural input perspective, the delta part is business data and application architecture components of an architecture roadmap. So basically, whatever kind of outputs we're getting from phase B business architecture and phase C information system and application architecture, all those are kind of leveraged as a input components for creating the technology architecture. So this is the this is the list as you can see, and please pause the video and you can go through it, take a note and try to memorize as much as possible. But pretty much these are the kind of standard inputs to these phases B, C and D. Now the primary steps. So these are very important. So just to give you a context here, normally during the exams, it is very important to remember or memorize the primary steps and the outputs. Normally, we get direct questions from these two sections for each and every ADM phases. But whereas you may or may not get a question for the input part or sometimes for the objective part, but the objective is kind of a summary, so you should remember that. But input part is if we can compare practically, then the primary steps and the outputs are more important compared to the input section. So on the similar format or the approach, we have captured the primary steps for all three phases, B, C, and D. Whereas you can see, we have captured the list in this all these particular columns, whereas we have highlighted what are the kind of a delta, or basically what are the important areas which we should understand properly and memorize. So like primary steps from phase B perspective, business architecture, like the reference reference models, viewpoints, and tools. Whereas these are some of the important technique which are performed during the business architecture phase B, like the business capability modeling, information mapping, organization mapping, process modeling, structured analysis, use case analysis, and value stream mapping. So we have just highlighted which are basically which are the more important one compared to the others one. That's all. Moving on, the other steps are developing the baseline business architecture description, developing the target business architecture description, perform gap analysis, define candidate roadmap components, resolve impacts across the architecture landscape, conduct formal stakeholder review, finalize the business architecture, and create or update the architecture definition document. So, as you can see, the highlighted or bold kind of sections are very important, and we may get or you may get a direct question from this section during your exam. Similarly, phase C, the information system architecture, as you can see, it's pretty same from a primary steps perspective. Some of the techniques are a bit different, like the data modeling technique, like entity relationship diagram and class diagram. These are the different techniques being normally being used during phase C compared to the phase B, where it is captured in this list. Other than that, here the primary steps are developing definitely the baseline data and application architecture description and developing the target data and application architecture description, and definitely the same steps like gap analysis, candidate roadmap components, the resolve impacts across architectural landscape, formal stakeholder review, finalizing the data and application architecture. Definitely, this is the heart uh, of this particular phase, whereas it was finalizing the business architecture for phase B, it should be phase C should for data and application architecture, and obviously create or update the architecture definition document. Excuse me. On the same format, phase D technology architecture, primarily the difference are, as you can see in the highlighted part, developing the baseline and target technology architecture and finalizing the technology architecture. Other than that, performing gap analysis, define candidate roadmap components, create or update architecture definition document. All these steps are pretty common and similar across all these phases of B, C, and D. So please try to understand and remember that all these points are very important for your exam, and wherever other than suppose try to do one thing uh, in a way I can suggest you try to memorize the phase B business architecture primary steps. If you can remember one of these particular column, it will be very easy. Just change a tweak. It is for phase C and phase D, because it will be just a change from business to data application and from there to technology. That's the only change. Other than that, it's pretty common and same, almost 99%. So other than this technique, what I would say. So that's how even we prepared and we try to memorize or remember and understand during our preparation. Okay, moving on. The next one, as usual, the primary outputs in the phase B, C, and D. Uh, as you can see, we are continuing with the similar format. It's a comparative analysis or study we are presenting here. And same way, you can see for the business architecture, we have highlighted and color coded, basically highlighted those are line items which are very important, and then color coded which are basically the delta or the difference compared to the business architecture phase B for phase C and D. So let me just go through the list quickly. So primary outputs are refined and updated version of the architecture vision phase deliverables, and the three important outputs are draft architecture definition document, draft architecture requirement specification, and business architecture components of an architecture roadmap. So these three are pretty important and kind of should be we should remember it for our exam perspective as well. And as you can see, for from B to C and C to D, the difference is basically the data and application architecture components and technology architecture components. So that's the only delta. Other than that, it's almost same. And if you can just same way, if you can remember the for phase B business architecture, the primary outputs, it will be easy for you to kind of phase C and D understand and remember for rest of the journey. Okay, so next part is the summary. So this is if you guys remember for the vision phase also we have this particular table, and for each of these phases also we have this table captured in the open group document, and this is one of the kind of a common or pretty kind of frequent questions that normally any candidate encounters, that out of this any of this phase A to H, you might get a particular this particular tabular format information, and and it will be asked which particular phase is this about. So I'll just quickly go through it. For phase B, C, D, it is the output and outcome is a set of domain architecture approved by the stakeholders for the problem being addressed with a set of gaps and work to clear the gaps understood by the stakeholders. Okay, and we have highlighted a set of domain architecture approved by the stakeholders. So this particular, we thought that if you can remember this phrase, it will help you to remember that this is about phase B, C, D. So in during the exam, if it is given this particular section, and if it is being asked that what is the name of the phase, so with this particular phrase, you can identify or you can remember this phase B, C, and D. And essential knowledge, it is mentioned how does the current enterprise fail to meet the preferences of the stakeholders, what must change to enable the enterprise to meet the preferences stakeholder, basically the gaps, and what work is necessary to realize the challenges that is consistent with the additional value being created work package. How do a stakeholder priority and preference adjust in response to value, effort, and risk of changes stakeholder requirements? So basically the gaps, work package, these are also important keywords, but you might encounter the same similar keyword in upcoming phases E and F. So that's why we didn't highlight it, because during exam the candidate get confused. So the best way to remember uh, this particular section is talking about phase B, C, D. Through this particular section, a set of domain architectures approved by the stakeholders. So yeah, please try to remember this, and it should be helpful for you guys to crack during the exam. So to continue with the exam essential and key points that we discussed, I would say the phase B, C, and D. Uh, the primary points are identify candidate architecture roadmap components based upon gaps between the baseline and target business architecture. So this is the most important point for the phase B, whereas for phase C, it's the identifying the candidate architecture roadmap components based upon the gaps between the baseline and target information systems, data and application architecture. And for phase D, it's basically the gaps between the baseline and target technology architecture. So these are the most important points we should remember for each of these phases B, C, and D. And we have highlighted one more point actually, and this is what we felt from our own experience and understanding, and wanted to share with you guys. Actually, it's kind of a tips for your exam as well, that most of us who normally works as a solution architects during our day-to-day life in a project life cycle. Normally we get involved uh, or get engaged with the type of activities that we discuss for phase B, C, and D. And even the open group also, they also understands that the architects who, the aspiring architects who actually involves or get engaged in this kind of activities phase B, C, D. And that's why when we study for our exam preparation, we tend to focus on this particular or these three phases much more compared to other phases. And the point is we are not required to concentrate, or I would say we are not required to provide extra importance for these phases, phase B, C, D, because normally we get less number of questions compared to the preliminary phase, vision phase, and also phase E, F, G, and H. And yes, that's a surprising fact, but it happens because Open Group also knows that normally we get involved and we are very comfortable with this phase B, C, and D because we work on a regular basis on these areas or this particular architecture field, so we're comfortable. But normally the questions comes from the other areas, but I'm not saying that we don't get question from phase B, C, D, but we get lesser question compared to the other uh, phases. So please do remember that. But yeah, obviously, but also please keep in mind that you might get the questions that we discussed or those we discussed in last a couple of minutes. Okay. So as usual, we have captured and consolidated couple of the sample questions that you might encounter during your actual exam. So let's go through these questions and try to kind of find out the suitable answer. So question number one, complete the sentence. The TOGAF standard covers the development of four architecture domains: application, data, technology, and it's pretty easy. It's the business architecture. Yep, the answer is business. Moving on to the next one, in which part of the ADM cycle are building blocks evolved using a common platform of steps? Answers are preliminary phase and phase A, B phase B, C, D, C is phase E and F, and D is phase H. So the answer is, we all know, it's phase B, C, D. The next one, what techniques used in phase B provide stakeholder context into why the organization needs business capability? And the answer is value stream analysis. So this is one of the techniques performed during the phase B, the business architecture phase, and this is kind of for the business capability it is being done. So please do remember this question, value stream analysis. It's a very important question, and you never know, you may encounter this question during your foundation exam as well. The next one, according to TOGAF, which of the following steps in phases B, C, and D occurs before development of the baseline or target architectures? The options are: conduct formal stakeholder review, B, create architecture definition document, C, define roadmap components, D, perform gap analysis, and E, select reference models, viewpoints, and tools. And the answer is option E, select reference models, viewpoints, and tools. Okay, so this is a kind of a bit of lengthy question, and we should read out properly and thoroughly. Consider the following ADM phases. So these are the kind of a description of the different phases are given in number 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, then we have to understand number 1 belongs to which phase, that is the A, B, C, D. Then number 2 is B, C, D, 3 is again, and 4. That's how we have to identify which particular statement belongs to which phase. Like identify the candidate architecture roadmap components based upon gaps between the baseline and target technology architecture. So one goes with D because technology. One D. Identify candidate architecture roadmap components based upon the gaps between the baseline and target information system, data and application. So it's 2 is C. Then 3, it's a candidate architecture roadmap for target business architecture. So 3 should be B. So I believe 1D, 2C, 3B. So this is the possible answer. Let me just go through the now option number 4. Opt-in approval for a statement of architecture work that defines a program of works to develop and deploy the architecture outline the architecture vision. Yes, it's a vision. So it's a 4A. So the answer should be D. Yes. Moving on, the next one is complete the sentence by selecting the applicable pair of words. Here and dash is used in the business architecture phase to help identify and understand business dash that the architecture has to address. And the options are activity model, perspective. I don't think so. B, business scenario. Yeah, business scenario is used in the business architecture to identify and understand business requirements, possibly. C is use case interconnections. I don't think so. Option D, business transformation, readiness assessment, and constraints. No, this is a name of a technique again, so I don't think it fits here. So the best suitable option should be option B, business scenario and the requirement. Yep. Okay. The next one is which of the following best describes a purpose of the gap analysis technique? Options are to catch errors in a project architecture early, to guide decision making throughout the enterprise, to help identify and understand business requirements, to highlight shortfalls between the baseline and target architecture. And possible answer is D because shortfall means kind of a gap analysis between the baseline and target. So that's a gap analysis, I believe, and answer should be D. Yeah. Okay, guys. So that's me, Shayan Guchait, and with my friend and colleague Arijit Chaudhary, we are running this YouTube channel, EdTech Society All Learners, and trying to share with you guys all the insights and our knowledge and experience throughout this journey for the TOGAF 10, how to pass and how to understand and conceptualize in 4 weeks or so. So please do subscribe, like, and follow our channel, and do provide your feedbacks. And if there is any question, comments, or any concern, would be very happy to help you. Thank you and have a good day.